Hi again. In this tutorial, we're going to be talking about navigation and actually snapping and the basics of Max. We're going to be continuing from the first session. I'm going to create a box, click and drag, and this is my box, and I'm going to create maybe another box by copying Shift and drag. In here, I copied this object. I'm going to move this on X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to rotate it maybe, and maybe scale it a bit. And I'm going to also change its color from pinkish to greenish. And here, we're going to be learning about alignments. Now, how to align objects to each other. First of all, we have two commands of alignment. We have quick align and align. The shortcuts are in here, the icons. You can go, this icon is align, and as you can see there's an arrow, which means if you press 1 second there's options. So the first one is align, the second one is quick align. So shortcuts for align is Alt A, I have to have an object selected, Alt A, and quick align, as you can see in here, Shift A, it's going to be the quick align. I'm going to start with the quick align, Shift A, select the object, Shift A, and then select the other one. When I click on the other one, automatically it will jump into the other object. Depending on what? Basically what happened is the pivot point of this object will snap on the pivot point of the other object on the position X, Y, and Z. That's why you can see it just jumped from here to here. The other option is align. Align is a bit more accurate, let's say, or you have more options. The quick align is just simply it will snap the pivot point to the pivot point on X, Y, Z of the axis. While we're going to use align, which is going to be the first icon in here, or Alt A to access the shortcut. Select this, Alt A, and then jump on the other one. What happened actually is almost the same, but now I have these options. I can align on X-axis alone, or Y-axis alone, or Z-axis alone. So I have the options, and then I can snap depending on pivot points or maybe centers. Let's say Z on Z, or X, Y, Z, center to center, or pivot point to pivot point. Or even I can just orient. So I'm going to align orientation on X, as you can see, and I can match scale, let's say in my case on Z. So now I matched this object on X, Y, Z in position, rotation, and scale. So this comes sometimes in handy if I want to align objects very quickly. I just use Shift A for quick align, or if I want to have more options, I press Alt A, which is align. Another thing to use objects like this is basically on creating objects on each other. For example, I have this box and I want to create another box on top of this. As you can see, by default the object will be created on the grid. So if I press on this auto grid, it will create an automatic grid wherever I'm pressing. So as you can see, I can hover my mouse and you can see my axis is just moving. So if I press in here, click and drag, now this is my base and that's my object. I can press in here or in here, or maybe somewhere here, or like this, and so on. That depends on whatever object I'm creating. I can create teapots in here, or in here, or in here, or in here, depending on which surface I'm going to create. So I can use this auto grid. It comes sometimes in handy, but sometimes maybe not. So make sure if you need it, just press it, and if you don't need it, just delete. So I'm going to delete all except this object. Now what I want to do, actually I want to create some snappings. If I have this object, I'm going to go and reduce my segments from the previous. If I have this object and I'm going to copy another object maybe, and also I'm going to move it X, Y, Z. So in here, first of all, I'm going to go access my snap tools. Snap tools are in here, which is snap toggles icon in here, or the shortcut is S. If you press S, you can turn it on. And in Max, as you have already maybe realized, the same shortcut that you turn any object on, let's say this is snapping on, the same shortcut will turn it off. So S on, and then I can turn it off. So First of all, I'm going to turn it on, sorry, and then I can access my options in here. I have two snaps. I can neglect the 2. I'm going to work with the 2.503. Let's see. If I want to work in these views, which is the top, front, and left, I would recommend that we use the 2.5D, okay, which will snap on 2 axes, this and this, 2 axes, and in here 2 axes. While in the perspective, I would suggest or recommend to use the 3D, which can snap on the 3 axes, X, Y, and Z. So in my case, I'm working with the perspective, so I'm gonna use the 3D snap. Second option is just I'm gonna right click on this icon and I can just choose what kind of snapping tools I need. I need to snap them on vertices or perpendicular, pivot, grid points, or whatever. I suggest that we use one of them, or maybe 2 sometimes, but don't turn them all on. It will get a bit confusing. So I'm gonna use vertex in my case. I'm gonna turn this off, and then I'm gonna move this object. As you can see, I can snap on the vertices. So I'm gonna snap this object in here, this point. I'm gonna move my cursor to change from cursor, regular pointer, into move to. So in here I'm gonna click and drag and move this object from this point, maybe to this, or to this vertex, or to this vertex, or maybe this, or whatever. Okay, so let's say I'm gonna put it in here, and now I can just move this object in here, shift and drag. I can copy it in here and maybe do several copies, let's say 2, and I get this. Okay, or maybe I want to do something else. Let's say I have this kind of duck in here, so I can just move this point, shift and drag from here to here, and then I can move this. Okay, so I have this kind of effect. I can just snap them together and have this kind of effect, and maybe I can just also use something we're gonna learn later, maybe chamfer. So it's gonna be chamfered from here and here, and have this small hole in here between those, maybe tile or maybe ducts of wood or anything. So that's gonna be snapping. The second option I'm gonna be talking about is this icon, angular snap. Angular snap shortcut is A. I can turn it on and turn it off. Angular snap, if it's turned off, I want to rotate. As you can see, I can rotate. I can view my rotation angle in here, which is says, let's say 21 point whatever, and definitely I'm gonna see it in here on the Z-axis. So if I want to snap, let's say 45 degrees, it's gonna be a bit really hard to snap the 45 exactly 45. So it's a bit hectic because I have decimal number. What I have to do, basically, I can turn on my snap, my angular snap, and now I can just rotate this, and it's gonna snap every 5 degrees. What if I want 1 degree, for example? I can change my options. If I right click in here, and I'm gonna go to the options in here, so all you have to do, this is my angle, I can change this from 5 to 1, for example, and now it will snap on each 1 degree. If you have, let's say I want to snap it to 29 degrees or 31 degrees or 33 or whatever. Usually 5 degrees is good for most of the cases, but maybe for this case, special case, you can change it and just return it back. The last thing I'm going to talk about snapping is an option in here. Right click on the options, okay, and this is enable access constraint. If I have 2 objects, for example, in this case, if I select this point in here and move it, it will move freely on 3 axes because I have the 3D snap and it's free. In my case, let's say I want to move this point and I want to snap it to this point on a specific axis, let's say on Z axis. What I have to do, just right click in here and enable access constraint. If you can see, I have this shortcut icon. If you don't have it, it's fine, you can get it from here. Right click in here and then I can get it by access constraint. So I can use it from here. I can turn my access constraint on and off in this case, or you can right click in here, enable access constraint, or turn it off. So I'm gonna turn on my access constraint and I'm gonna select which axis I need to constraint on. Constraint, basically it's like kind of link or just lock. So I'm gonna link on X, let's say I'm going to turn X, or in my case, if you don't have this icon on, I can just press on the X axis or the Y axis or the Z axis. You can see it's changing in here. So select the X axis and now move this object from this point on the Z axis, or I mean the X axis, to this point. Now they are aligned, as you can see from the top, they are aligned exactly, but this is on the Z axis, and the Y axis is a bit different than the other, but on the Z axis they are aligned. On the X axis, sorry, they are aligned. So I can use this axis constraint to use such things. Let's say I want to snap it on the Z axis now. I can press on Z and now move this point only on Z and snap it on this point. So now they are aligned on the same level. The only difference is Y axis. So I can use this axis constraint. It comes in handy in here. And if you like it, you can work with it. If not, sometimes you can turn it on and off, whatever you need. That's basically a bit more about talking about snapping tools. So now I'm gonna just talk a bit about any object I create. As I've said before, you can go to the modifier tab and I can access the length of the object. If I want to change my grid in here, it says 25.4 by 25.4. Maybe I want this object to be 10 by 10, or maybe 100 by 100. Let's say 1 meter. Let's say I'm going to be working on a building which is going to be a bit big, so that's going to be, if it's going to be 10 centimeters, it's going to be a bit small. So what I have to do, just go to customize unit setup. First of all, you're going to be having maybe this on generic units. Just go to the metric, or maybe US standard, depending on which kind of units you're going to be working. In my case, I'm going to metric and I'm going to be using centimeters. So as you can see, everything is centimeters. But this number is not really helpful. It says 25.4 centimeters. If I want to change this number to be a good number, let's say 1, 10, 100 or something like that, just go to the system unit setup. And in here, what it's doing, it's basically converting from centimeters to inches. So just move this into centimeters for my case. It says now grid equal 10 centimeters. If I want to make it 100 centimeters, I just multiply this number by 10. For example, 10. So that's going to be 100 centimeters. So I think this is good in my case, maybe, or maybe 10 centimeters. So I'm going to keep it 10 centimeters, and now it's good. What I have to do, basically, I have to change the grid before I start working with any object. So I'm going to move this, I'm going to do it, let's say 100 centimeter by 100 centimeter by 200 centimeters. And that's it. You see this box now, it's a bit bigger than it used to be before, because now we're working in 10 centimeter grid. We used to be working in 24 point. So it's almost double. So now, if I have this box, I can access its segments. And why I want to access the segments? Because I will be needing this for modeling part. In this case, I'm going to be talking about the modifier list. In the modifier list, I'm going to talk about a few modifiers, and definitely there's a lot more you can check or maybe try later on. In my case, I'm going to be working with, let's say, a few objects. I'm going to create different objects, and I can do the same for each one. So I'm going to create a cylinder, maybe a sphere, maybe a plane, or maybe, I don't know, maybe another box. Okay. So let's say I'm going to select this cylinder, in my case, and go to the modifier tab, and I'm going to go access something called bend. I'm going to press B, it's going to go on bend, and this is bend. As you can see in here, Max just laid this modifier tab over the other one, which is cylinder, and now bend. It's like layers. If I access the bend, you have the parameters of it, and you can access cylinder. Now these are the parameters of the cylinder. So each one has different parameters. If I want to turn it off, I can turn it off from here, or if I want to delete, select the bend and press on the delete key. It will be deleted. So in my case, I'm going to access the bend parameters. So I have two options I really care about, which is the angle. I can bend this object, and the direction, and I can turn it. And definitely we'll be working on the z-axis in my case. If I'm having the cylinder, let's say, on the front or from the left, I would use the other axis. I can just try them and make sure which one is the right one. In my case, it's the z now, which is perfect. Let's say I'm gonna do 90 degrees, 90 degrees for the cylinder. And now, as you can see, my cylinder is bended. But the thing is not really smooth. So what's in here is actually I need to add more segments on the height. So that's where I should go to the cylinder now and access my height segments. If I go low, as you can see now, I have no segments. It's gonna be moving from this point to this point immediately. If I add one segment, it's gonna happen like this, 2, 3, 4. The more I add segments, the smoother the curve is gonna be. Let's say for this, it's perfect now. I'm gonna select the, let's say this box. I'm gonna access something else called taper. In my case, taper will do a scale for the upper part of this selection. Could be anything, not even a box, could be an object or a table or whatever. So I can just scale this from up, low or high, and I can just curve it outward or inward. As you can see, if I curve outward or inward, nothing is gonna happen because simply I don't have segments. That's why it's going straight. So select the box and give it height segments. And now you can see in the taper, I can just curve it inward or outward, which is perfect. The same case in here. I need to add twist, for example. Press T and select twist. In here I can twist this object. And you can see I have something bad. So go to the box and then I have to add segments on the height. So height segments, and that's it. And here I can see this clearly. I can snap it in, sorry, I can just twist it on and on, however I want. I'm gonna be working on the sphere, for example. I'm gonna add segments to it. I need to be smooth, for example, and I'm gonna add a new modifier. It's called FFD. There's several FFDs. Okay, I'm gonna talk about, there's 2 and 3 and 4s, and there's the option box, which I can just modify it as much as I want, or a cylindrical shape FFD. I'm gonna select the 3 by 3 by 3 in this case, and will make sense a bit. 3 by 3 means 3 in the width, 3 in the height, and 3 in the length. 3 segments. The 2 is gonna be have 1, 2. The 4 is gonna be have 1, 2, 3, 4 in each axis. So to access these points, all I have to do is just press on the FFD or press on the plus sign and select control points. Same thing, if I press in here, it will select the control points. Now I can select each point and I can do this kind of modification. So however I move these points, the object will move from the inside. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna select the top 3 control points. I'm gonna move them on the Z, X, these 2, and I'm gonna push them diagonally down. I can end up with kind of chair. Same thing goes if I want to go out of the FFD. I need to press on the FFD and then do deselect. Now select the plane. I'm gonna add also some segments, let's say 20 by 20. I'm gonna add something called noise, and in noise I have 2 things I need to worry about: the scale and the strength. In my case, I need to add strength on the Z axis, which is up and down, you can see. And the scale value is basically the ups and downs, how close they are together or how far they are. Okay, if I want it to be very noisy, I just go on the scale a bit downward. Maybe I can push it a bit up, and this is it. I have a noisy terrain. If I want to smooth it up, I can just go access something called turbo smooth, and inside the iteration I can add more iteration, which is more smoothness. Just make sure don't go too high. And in here you can see I have such a maybe a terrain. I need it to be lower. I just access the noise and make it a bit smoother and not that bumpy, or maybe scale a bit high and have it a bit the kind of terrains, or let's say this is kind of mountains, a bit further from each other. So I can just access and design it as much as I like. And that's basically about modifier list and a bit more modeling. In the next tutorial, we're going to be talking about modeling in general and start working with a details model using some kind of modifier, which is an edit poly. For now, I think this is really good to get started with 3D Max. What I need to mention, the last thing, is basically if I have an object, anything I can work with. Okay. Just gonna make it simple. If I press G, I'm gonna hide the grid and turn it on and off. And I have two more options. First of all, F3, which gonna be shifting from shaded or realistic to wireframe. I can change it from here. By pressing here, I can change it to wireframe, or I can change it to something else, maybe bounding box, or hidden lines, or faceted, or facets I mean, or whatever. I can change it to clay, or anything else. But usually, most of the time, we're gonna be using wireframe and shaded, okay, or realistic in this case. What I would suggest to be using, basically, instead of using realistic, I would press F3 or change this to shaded, so that I don't see the shadows. It will help me a bit more with my graphic card, especially if I have big scenes. The second shortcut is F4. Whenever I have shaded or realistic, if I press F4, I can see, let's say I'm going to add segments in here, 555. If I press in here and deselect, I cannot see the wireframe. So I have to go F3 to see the wireframe and then F3 back to go to shaded. If I press F4 on shaded, I will see the wireframe on the shaded, so I can be able to select, let's say, my polygons and do some kind of extrusion or the more details in the modeling area. So that's it. So F3, I go wireframe, F3 again, I go shaded, and then F4, I go wireframe on shaded, on and off. That's it. And for the last thing I need to mention before we wrap it up, basically a shortcut, which is a shift space. I mean, if you select any object and you press spacebar, look at this lock button in here, it will turn on. And now if I need to select or deselect, I cannot. It's just locked on this object, and using this tool, I cannot move it. I cannot deselect. It's just selecting this object and moving it all the time. Just make sure this selection, it's not turned on. So I can turn it on and off by pressing on it, clicking on it, or just pressing spacebar. I can turn on and off the object. Just make sure, sometimes it will come in handy later on. I think it's okay. If I want to do undos, I can just go undo from here, or redo, or shortcut for undo is Ctrl Z to undo. It will come in handy. If you need to change the undo setup, it's not a big deal. You can go to customize, preferences, and then general tab by default. Scene undo by default they are 220. You can just make them maybe 200 for just on the start, because maybe you're going to be using the undos a lot. But if not, just keep them 20. I think they're better because they come easy on your memory for the computer. That's it for this. And in the next sessions, we're going to be talking about modeling and a bit more details about edit poly. Thank you for listening and have a good day.